My name is Clara Ellison. I'm 29 years old, and I realized my relationship was ending while I was babysitting a grill no one else wanted to touch. The hot dogs had gone from lightly charred to small funerals, and the smoke kept curling into my eyes like it wanted to make me cry. I refused to give it that satisfaction. Behind me, from the patio table, came a laugh I knew too well, Ethan's stage laugh, the one he pulled out when he needed the room to believe he was thriving. It was bright, a little too loud, the kind that turns strangers' heads for the wrong reasons. Seriously, I heard him say, voice riding the edges of that laugh. Natalie gets me flowers for no reason. Last week I was sick, and she brought me soup. My best friend treats me better than Clara ever will. He didn't say my name like a confession or a joke. He said it flat, a fact laid neatly on a table full of people who had never bothered to know me. Beyond the silhouette I made beside him, there was a beat, then the soft thud of approval around him. Chuckles, a few throaty laughs. That particular brand of group sound that tells you you're not just outnumbered, you were never even counted. I didn't whirl around. I didn't let the tongs clatter onto the deck. The hot dogs hissed and popped. I watched them blister, and something inside me cooled to a glass-calm lake. The words landed, and instead of shattering me, they sorted me. It was like finally getting a diagnosis after months of feeling off. I wasn't crazy. I wasn't the jealous girlfriend. I was a contestant in a game I hadn't signed up to play, and Natalie, sweet, thoughtful Natalie, was the prize Ethan was performing for. I turned the last salvageable sausage and laid it gently onto a platter, as if the whole mess deserved ceremony. Then I wiped my hands on a dish towel, set the tongs down, and smiled. My mother used to say I had a smile that could pour oil on fire. That night, it could have glossed a volcano. Carrying the platter, I walked to the patio table where the laughter was already collapsing into guilty coughs. Ethan's friends, Tom in his vintage baseball cap, Kayla with the shellac manicure, two others whose names slipped out of my head the second we met, suddenly found their phones, their drinks, the middle distance. Natalie wasn't there. Of course she wasn't. She floated into rooms like perfume and left the same impression. Soft, expensive. Gone before you remember to ask what's in it. I set the plate in the center of the table. Fresh from my crimes at the grill, I said lightly. Then I met Ethan's eyes. He looked sun-flushed, charming, 2 beers past considerate. Natalie sounds amazing, I added, as if we were all swapping podcast recommendations. The laughter died. Even the cicadas seemed to pause. Ethan blinked. She is, he said too quickly. I mean, she's a really good friend. I know, I said, unscrewing a bottle of water. You two have a special connection. I don't want to get in the way of that. He stared at me, that careful stare men do when they're not sure if they're in a joke or a trap. Then came the faintest uptick at the corner of his mouth, relief disguised as humility, a win. I watched it cross his face like a cloud's shadow. Well, he said, puffing out a breath of laughter. I'm glad you get it. I took a sip of water and tasted metal. I get a lot of things, I said, pleasant and opaque. More and more every day. Kayla coughed. Tom adjusted his cap. Someone muttered something about cornhole, which is still a terrible name for a game, and fled to the yard. The table scattered, leaving Ethan and me in the kind of silence that follows thunder. He tried to reclaim easy ground. You okay? He asked, reaching for my hand like a peace offering he hadn't earned. Of course, I said with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. You deserve people who treat you well. There was a time when I would have argued right there. I would have stacked every late bill I paid next to every bouquet she ever bought, weighed groceries against roses, sick day soup against the week I stayed up with him through Excel spreadsheets and fevers. I would have tried to make math out of affection, but that's the thing I learned holding that platter of burnt offerings. Math doesn't work where appetite runs the show. People don't choose the one who stands steady. They choose the one who makes them feel like the lights just came up on a stage that belongs to them. The evening wobbled on. Music and mosquitoes, paper plates bending under salads no one really wanted, the sweet fatigue of heat. I moved through it like a ghost, refilling the ice bucket, laughing at the right volume, nodding at the right times. And all the while, a quiet decision set its roots inside me. Not the kind you announce with stomping or slammed doors, the kind you grow in the dark while everyone else is busy performing. Ethan, buoyed by whatever narrative he'd just sold to the table, got brighter. He circled back to me with half apologies disguised as jokes. Didn't mean to make it sound like that, he murmured. You know how they are. He gestured to the patio, to the universe, to the convenient vagueness of they. Natalie she shows up, like when I was sick, remember? She brought you soup, I finished for him kindly. I remember. He searched my face for a wall to push against, for a crack where he could wedge the old argument. He didn't find one, just calm. He didn't know what to do with calm. People mistake calm for surrender because they can't imagine a world in which you stop explaining yourself and start planning. As the sun fell into the trees and the lanterns flickered on, I excused myself and went back to the grill. The platter was empty, save for one coal-black cylinder. I held it with the tongs, studied it, and then tossed it into the trash bag with a soft thud that felt ceremonial. Some things can't be salvaged. Some things shouldn't be. On my way to the kitchen, I passed the sliding door and caught my reflection, hair escaping my braid, smoke smudged at my cheekbone, eyes steady. I looked like a woman who had finally found her footing on a floor that had been tilting for months. In the kitchen, the hostess, Sarah, was lighting a candle in a pie and singing under her breath. She glanced up. You okay, C? Mm-hmm, I said, rinsing the tongs. Just thinking about costumes. Already? She laughed. It's August. Our Halloween party is practically tomorrow in friend group time, I said. I was wondering if I wanted someone to, I don't know, take a few nice pictures later in the night this year. Who would you ask? Your cousin still dating that semi-pro photographer? Sarah's eyes lit. Ben, yeah, he takes great candids. Why? I smiled. Might be a big night for memories. Her mouth fell open, a perfect O. Clara, are you? Thinking, I said. That's all. Just thinking. I dried the tongs and returned to the yard where the air buzzed with small talk and summer. Ethan was on the grass, tossing a beanbag with too much flourish, pitching his laugh into the dusk. He looked happy. I was happy for him in the way you can be happy for a child chasing fireflies, knowing he loves the glow and has never once thought about the jar. He saw me and jogged over, that boyish run that always looked a half step from a stumble. Hey, he said, breathless, cornhole finals. You and me? I'll watch, I said. You're on a roll. He threw an arm around my shoulders and squeezed, performative and careless. Best cheerleader in the world, he said to the group at large, and let go before the compliment had time to find me. I watched him return to the game. The beanbag left his hand and arced through the twinkle-lit dark, a small soft thing flying true. A month ago, his comment at that table would have hollowed me out. Tonight it built a quiet room inside me where I could stand and look at everything without shaking. In that room, I could admit what I'd dodged. I had been keeping score in a game I didn't invent, asking a coin to be grateful while it was passed from hand to hand. I could admit I didn't want him to choose me because I outspent a bouquet. I wanted a choice that didn't feel like charity. The moon slid up over the roofline. People started hugging their goodbyes. I gathered empty cups, helped stack chairs, the good soldier of the evening. When it was time to go, Ethan brushed a kiss across my temple like a signature. You're the best, he said, a little slurred from the last 2 beers. Thanks for, I do know, I said, meeting his eyes so he'd see it, the clarity, the new weather moving in. Drive safe. On the ride home, he talked about Natalie without realizing he was using sentences like rope. How thoughtful she was. How she remembered little things. How easy everything felt around her. I made the right noises. I watched the city slip by in reflected lights and thought about the difference between easy and honest. One is sugar water, the other is blood. When we reached our building, he jogged around to open my door, the gentlemanly gesture he saved. For when an audience might be nearby, there was no one. He did it anyway. Maybe that counts for something. Maybe it doesn't. Upstairs, he spilled onto the couch, kicked off his shoes, and scrolled his phone with a grin that wasn't meant for me. I stood in the doorway and looked at my life, the bookshelf we built, the plant that refused to die, the photo from a winter weekend where his smile looked real and mine did too. I could feel the future shifting its weight. He glanced up. You coming to bed? In a bit, I said. I want to write something down. He shrugged, already elsewhere. At my desk, I opened a new document and typed a title without quite knowing why. Ledger. I didn't fill it yet. I just watched the cursor blink, a small metronome counting down to something I could not yet name out loud. In the quiet, I heard my own voice the way you hear a radio station when you finally tune in. Calm, certain, not surrendering, agreeing to the terms of a war I hadn't declared, but would finish. I closed the laptop. Tomorrow I would start giving Ethan everything he said he wanted. Tonight, I let myself feel nothing at all. The next morning, sunlight pressed through the blinds like it was prying secrets out of the room. Ethan was still asleep, one arm draped across the couch where he'd passed out scrolling, phone face down on the floor like it had fainted from exhaustion. I stood in the kitchen, stirring coffee I didn't want, and watched him with a kind of detached curiosity, like you might watch a stranger sleeping on the train. He looked harmless when he slept, boyish, the faint crease between his brows smoothed out, the one that always deepened whenever I asked him about bills, about the future, about us. In those moments, he carried the face of a man who'd convinced himself he had options, like life was a menu with unlimited refills. I sipped my coffee. It tasted bitter and necessary. The plan, if you can call something so quiet a plan, was simple. Stop fighting. Stop begging. Stop performing as the insecure girlfriend. If Ethan wanted Natalie so badly, if her bouquets and soups outweighed my rent checks and late-night care, then I'd let him have her. Not just have her. I'd hand her to him like a gift. The ribbon, the bow, the whole package. Because when someone insists they're starving, sometimes the cruelest thing you can do is give them more food than they can swallow. By the time Ethan shuffled awake, hair sticking up like straw, I'd already decided who I was going to be. The girlfriend who trusted him completely, who encouraged every dinner with Natalie, who laughed when her name lit up his phone at midnight, who nodded approvingly when he slipped out for friend time. It would be my finest performance. "Morning," he mumbled, scrubbing his face with both hands. "Morning," I said, cheerful, too cheerful. "Coffee's in the pot." He blinked at me, suspicious of kindness the way a stray dog is suspicious of a handout. "You're in a good mood." "Shouldn't I be?" I smiled. "You're happy. That makes me happy." It was such a foreign line it made even me pause. But his shoulders loosened. Relief spread across his face. He didn't ask questions. People rarely do when you hand them exactly what they want. The days that followed blurred into an odd routine. I started playing the part of enthusiastic cheerleader in Ethan's life. When Natalie texted him to meet for dinner, I didn't sulk. I pressed his jacket into his hands and said, "Have fun. Say hi to her for me." When she dropped by, unannounced, with iced coffee for him, I didn't bristle. I thanked her warmly, then excused myself to my office, closing the door softly. From there, I listened to their laughter filter through the thin wall, the way her voice lingered. Too sweet, too careful, as if every syllable was an audition. Sometimes I caught Ethan watching me afterward, like he expected a scene, but I gave him nothing, just a smile and a question about his day. He relaxed more and more, unaware that I was slowly, methodically, letting the ground beneath him turn to sand. It wasn't all restraint. There were nights the anger burned so hot it made my hands tremble. Nights I stared at the ceiling and replayed his voice at that barbecue, so casual, so certain. Natalie treats me better than Clara ever will. I wanted to scream, to throw things, to demand answers, but instead I opened my laptop and returned to the document I'd titled Ledger. Column A. My contributions: rent, utilities, groceries, insurance. The night I drove him to urgent care at 3 a.m., the week I covered his share of the bills when he forgot. Column B, Natalie's: flowers, soup, coffee. The contrast was absurd, but I needed to see it in black and white. Numbers don't lie, even when people do. One Friday evening, I came home to find them on the couch together, watching something on Netflix. Ethan's arm draped casually along the back, not quite touching her shoulders, but close enough. She laughed, head tilting toward him, and I caught the faintest flicker in her eyes when she realized I was standing in the doorway. "Hey, Clara," she said brightly, too brightly. "We ordered Thai. Hope that's okay." "It's great," I said, setting down my bag. "Thanks for thinking of me." I smiled. Natalie smiled back, but hers faltered just a little, like she couldn't decide if I was genuine or playing a game. Ethan beamed, oblivious. "See? It's all good. You don't mind, right?" "Of course not," I said, walking into the kitchen. My voice was light, but my chest felt like steel tightening around a secret. Later that night, when I was alone in bed and Ethan was snoring beside me, my mind spun with the image of them on the couch. The ease, the almost touch, the way Natalie looked at me like she knew I was either the biggest fool or the most dangerous player in the room. Maybe both. A week later, I set my first trap without him even realizing it. "Do you know what's coming up?" I asked Ethan one morning, pouring cereal into his bowl. He looked up, milk carton in hand. "What?" "The Halloween party," I said, keeping my tone casual. "Sarah and Tom's annual thing. Biggest night of the year." "Oh, right," he said, already smirking. I tilted my head. "We should go as a couple costume. Bonnie and Clyde, Cleopatra and Caesar, something like that." For a split second, I saw panic flash in his eyes, then hesitation, then the faintest grin. "Actually," he trailed off, setting down the milk. "Natalie and I already kind of joked about going as an angel and devil. It was just this silly idea." "Perfect," I interrupted, laughing lightly. "That's hilarious. You two will look great. I'll just go as something random. A witch, maybe." He blinked, surprised. "You're okay with that?" "Of course," I said, patting his hand. "Why wouldn't I be?" The relief on his face was almost insulting. He thought he had navigated a minefield, dodged an explosion. What he didn't see was that I had just handed him the rope. Angel and devil. Together. In front of everyone. The stage was set. And in my chest, calm settled in again. The dangerous kind. By the time October air sharpened into something crisp and metallic, our apartment had turned into a second home for Natalie. I'd come back from work and find her shoes by the door, her laughter spilling from the living room, her perfume woven into the cushions of our couch. She never looked guilty. That was the strangest part. She greeted me like an honored guest in my own home. "Clara, you're back. We were just watching that show you recommended." Or, "Hey, I brought Ethan some of those lemon bars from the bakery he likes. Try one." Always warm, always generous, and always careful to plant herself beside him, angled just so, as if even her posture confessed she belonged more in that spot than I ever did. I'd smile, thank her, excuse myself, and slip into my office. The thin wall between us became my theater curtain. On one side, laughter, private jokes, the low hum of intimacy. On the other, me, lit only by the blue screen glow, documenting everything. Ledger update. Rent, $700. My half. Groceries, $180. Electricity, $92. Ethan's birthday dinner, $140. Natalie's contributions. Lemon bars, a paperback novel, a scarf. I stared at the absurdity of it. I was feeding the machine. She was sprinkling sugar on top. And somehow, in Ethan's mind, sugar outweighed steel. It wasn't only the gifts. It was the way he started framing her gestures like evidence in a trial I hadn't realized I was losing. "She listens so well," he'd tell me after she left. Or, "She remembers the smallest details. It's just thoughtful, you know?" And I would nod, pretending to agree, hiding the acid rising in my throat. I was the one holding our life together by threads of bills and deadlines. She was the confetti tossed in the air, and apparently, confetti was winning. One evening, I arrived home to find Ethan and Natalie in the kitchen. She was chopping vegetables like she belonged there, like this was her countertop, her knife, her chopping rhythm echoing too comfortably in my space. Ethan leaned against the fridge, sipping wine, smiling as though she were the sun itself. "Clara," Natalie said, turning with that bright smile, "we're making stir-fry. Hope you're hungry." I stood in the doorway, setting down my bag with deliberate slowness. "You two make a great team," I said softly. Ethan grinned, oblivious. "Right? She's got skills." Natalie's smile flickered, just a fraction, like she'd caught the undertone. Maybe she did. But she kept chopping, and I kept smiling. That night, alone in bed while Ethan snored beside me, I thought about wars. Not the kind fought with soldiers, but the kind fought with patience. Wars where you don't meet force with force. You let the opponent walk into their own trap, blind and proud. The Halloween party became my North Star. Everything pointed toward it. I began weaving the threads carefully. At brunch with Sarah, I leaned in over coffee. "Do you think Ben would bring his camera to the party this year? You know how good he is with candid shots." Sarah's eyes widened, curious. "Something you want captured?" I smiled. "Maybe. You'll see." With Ethan, I was even softer. When he told me about the angel and devil costume plan with Natalie, I encouraged it. "That's adorable," I said. "You two will steal the show." The way his relief washed over him almost made me laugh. He thought I was evolving, maturing, finally secure enough to let him flaunt his connection with her. What he didn't realize was that I was no longer fighting for him. I was choreographing his downfall. The days ticked by. Natalie dropped off more gifts. Ethan praised her more loudly, and I kept feeding the calm that grew inside me like a second heartbeat. One night, while he was in the shower, I opened his phone. Not to snoop, at least not in the way people usually mean. I wasn't searching for declarations of love or secret plans. I already knew what they were. I wanted his tone. The messages were full of inside jokes, emojis, snapshots of coffee cups, "You'd love this song" links. Innocent on the surface, dangerous underneath. The kind of daily drip that creates intimacy more addictive than sex. I locked the phone and set it back on the nightstand. The shower was still running. My reflection stared back from the black screen, calm, composed, unflinching. For the first time, I whispered aloud the truth I hadn't wanted to face. He's already hers. I'm just setting the stage so the world sees it. And with that, the plan hardened into something unshakable. The Halloween party wasn't just going to be a social gathering. It was going to be the reckoning. The first week of October slid by in shades of orange and early dusk, the kind of evenings where the air itself seemed to whisper change. And in our apartment, the change was almost theatrical. Ethan grew bolder, Natalie grew more present, and I grew quieter, calmer, more deliberate with every passing day. By now, it wasn't unusual for me to walk through the front door after work and find Natalie's laugh greeting me before Ethan did. She'd be perched on the couch with her knees tucked beneath her, scrolling through a playlist they were building together, or leaning across the counter with a glass of wine, telling him about her day. It wasn't her presence that burned me. It was the performance. The way Ethan mirrored her energy, brighter and sharper when she was around, as though she was the one tuning his strings and I was just background noise. One night I came home and found them sprawled across the living room floor with open takeout boxes between them. Ethan glanced up mid-bite and waved me over. "Babe, we got your favorite noodles." Natalie thought of it. The way he said her name, light, casual, coated in warmth, landed harder than any insult could have. I smiled anyway, sat down, and ate silently while they filled the air with their banter. Every laugh, every playful touch of arms, every shared look was another note in a song I wasn't invited to sing. But the calm inside me didn't waver, because I already knew the chorus would end differently. It was Sarah who gave me the final piece I needed. We were out for coffee, just the two of us, and she leaned in conspiratorially. "So, is there something you want to tell me about Halloween?" I stirred my latte, slow and deliberate. "Why?" Her grin was mischievous. "Because Tom told me you asked about Ben bringing his camera, and I know you. You don't ask unless you have a reason." I let the silence hang, then gave her a small smile. "I might be planning something, but it's a secret. Promise me you won't say a word." Her eyes widened. "Oh my God, Clara, are you—" "Shh," I said, raising a finger. "Just let it be a surprise." The word surprise tasted sweet in my mouth, because that's what it would be. A surprise for Ethan, a surprise for Natalie, a surprise for everyone who had laughed at that barbecue. Sarah squeezed my hand, practically vibrating with excitement. "I won't breathe a word." Good, I thought. Let the rumors swirl. Let them expect fireworks of one kind while I set the fuse for another. At home, I continued my performance. When Ethan mentioned the costumes again, testing my reaction, I laughed. "You two as angel and devil? It's perfect. You'll look amazing together." He blinked at me, genuinely stunned. "You're really okay with it?" I reached out, brushed his arm lightly, and gave him a smile that could have won awards. "Of course. I'm not going to be the jealous girlfriend anymore. You deserve to have fun." Relief washed over his face so fast it was almost insulting. He leaned in, kissed my cheek. "You're the best, Clara. Seriously. Best." That word hit differently now. Best meant supportive. Best meant silent. Best meant standing still while someone else was lifted higher. But he had no idea that being the best was just my costume, and I was wearing it until the curtain dropped. That night, when he fell asleep on the couch again with the TV still buzzing, I sat at my desk and opened my ledger. The columns had grown. Clara, rent, groceries, insurance, gas, dinner with his parents. Natalie, takeout noodles, Angel halo headband for the costume. It would be laughable if it weren't so tragic. But the numbers weren't for Ethan. They were for me. Proof that I wasn't crazy. Proof that love and loyalty had turned into commodities, and mine had been discounted while hers was given a price tag of gold. I closed the laptop and stared out the window at the October night. Leaves scuttled across the sidewalk like whispers of what was coming. The Halloween party was less than 3 weeks away, and I had every intention of making it unforgettable. The first trap was subtle. I found Tom at a mutual friend's dinner and pulled him aside, lowering my voice. Listen, I need your help. Don't tell Ethan. I want to do something big at the party, like a proposal. Tom's eyes nearly popped out of his head. Clara, that's huge. I know, I said, feigning nervousness. That's why I want Ben around with his camera. I want the moment captured, but it has to stay secret. Can you make sure he's nearby when things get going? Tom clapped my shoulder. Absolutely. Consider it done. He looked at me with such admiration, like I was about to prove my devotion to Ethan in front of everyone. I smiled and let him think that. Because the truth was, I didn't need a ring. I didn't need a speech. All I needed was a flashbulb at the right moment and an audience who would never forget what they saw. At home, Ethan was already deep in the Halloween spirit. Natalie texted costume ideas at all hours, and he'd read them out loud with a grin, waiting for me to bristle. I never did. I encouraged him. I told him he'd look great. I even offered to help pin his devil horns in place the night of. Wow, he said one evening, slipping his arms around me. You're seriously the coolest girlfriend ever. Maybe, I said softly, or maybe I've just learned how to give you exactly what you want. He chuckled, not catching the blade in the sentence. I rested my head on his chest, hearing his heartbeat steady and blind, and thought, enjoy this while you can, because soon everyone else will hear it too, and they'll know what it really beats for. The week of the Halloween party carried a strange electricity. Ethan hummed with anticipation, like a kid before Christmas morning, except his gift wasn't wrapped in paper and ribbon. It was Natalie, his angel to his devil. Our apartment became costume central. On the kitchen table, a halo, a white dress bag, horns, and a plastic pitchfork. I watched him handle them with a reverence he never gave my careful spreadsheets or the bills stacked by the door. You'll help me with the horns, right? He asked one night, holding them up like a prize. Of course, I said lightly, folding laundry. You want them tilted forward or back? He laughed, kissed the top of my head, and went back to texting Natalie. His screen lit his face in a glow brighter than anything I could give. I wasn't jealous anymore. That surprised me. What I felt was colder, sharper, like holding a scalpel instead of a wound. The day of the party arrived. Leaves spun madly in the wind. Orange confetti tossed across the sidewalks. I dressed deliberately. Black dress, red lipstick, a pair of plastic fangs. A vampire. Generic, forgettable, detached. Exactly the role I wanted. Ethan emerged from the bedroom in his devil costume, grinning wide, Natalie behind him in angel white. Together they looked like a set. She adjusted his horns. He fixed her halo. They laughed, and for a moment I almost admired the symmetry. You look great, I said, and I meant it. Ethan beamed, Natalie flushed, and neither of them noticed the steel underneath my smile. At Sarah and Tom's house, the party was already pulsing. String lights glowed in webs across the ceiling, music throbbed against the walls, and everyone wore masks of joy and alcohol. I played my part, fetching Ethan drinks, complimenting costumes, laughing on cue. Clara, you're glowing tonight, Kayla said, a little tipsy, clutching my arm. I love your fangs. Thanks, I said. I'm just letting loose. Letting go, really. Meanwhile, Ethan and Natalie moved through the room like performers on stage, their angel and devil act drawing glances and giggles. People whispered how perfect they looked together. Ethan drank it in. Natalie blushed, basked, then blushed again. I never stopped smiling. My job was simple, keep Ethan's glass full. Whenever I noticed his beer low, I fetched another. When the group gathered near the bar, I bought a round of shots. When he wobbled back from the bathroom, I pressed a cold bottle into his hand with a playful grin. Babe, you're trying to kill me, he joked, half laughing. Never, I said sweetly. I just want you to have fun. By 10:30, his voice had grown louder, his gestures wider. By 11, he was exactly where I needed him. Overconfident, sloppy, convinced of his own charm. I positioned myself carefully, chatting with Tom and a few others, back turned, but eyes sharp. Across the room, Ethan and Natalie danced in their mismatched rhythm. Her laugh a touch forced now, his devil horns sliding crooked as he leaned closer, closer. Ben, the photographer, was already nearby, camera in hand. Sarah had done her part without realizing it, keeping him orbiting around us, waiting for the proposal. The music swelled. Natalie's halo glowed under the lights. Ethan's arm draped across her back, his mouth close to her ear. I saw her smile falter, saw her stiffen. Then it happened. He leaned in, sloppy and certain, lips aiming for hers. Not a joke, not a harmless brush. A kiss meant for claiming, for humiliating. Natalie shoved him hard, her angel's face twisting into horror. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The music didn't stop, but it may as well have. Flash, flash. Ben's camera caught everything, her recoil, his drunken lunge, the shocked faces turning toward them. And me, standing just far enough away, sipping my drink with a calm that burned hotter than fire. The room's energy collapsed into silence, then whispers. Natalie's halo slipped sideways, her eyes darting for escape. Ethan stumbled, confusion painting his face like a child punished for misbehaving. I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let the scene play out, knowing the story had already shifted. The jealous girlfriend? She didn't exist anymore. The victim? She stood here in black lipstick, fangs glinting, watching as the devil and angel fell from their stage. And the best part? Everyone was watching with me. The moment Ethan's lips missed their mark and collided instead with Natalie's furious shove, the air inside Sarah and Tom's house seemed to vanish. Music still thumped faintly in the background, but no one was listening. Conversations cut off mid-sentence. Laughter died in people's throats. Every head turned toward them. Toward him. Toward her. Natalie's halo tilted sideways. Her white dress now a shield rather than a costume. She backed away, hand raised as if fending off fire. "What the hell, Ethan?" she shouted, her voice sharp enough to slice through the silence. The devil stumbled, blinking, his horns crooked, his grin collapsing into confusion. I thought," he stammered, swaying as he reached for her again. She recoiled, eyes wide with humiliation. "You thought wrong." The whispers began immediately. "Did he just... Oh my God, in front of everyone? Is he drunk?" The camera flashed twice more. Ben, bless his oblivious heart, kept shooting, thinking he was documenting some pre-proposal drama. He didn't realize he was immortalizing Ethan's collapse. I stayed exactly where I was, chatting lightly with Tom and Mike, my body angled away, but my eyes trained on the scene in the corner of my vision. My heart didn't race. My palms didn't sweat. Instead, a strange serenity wrapped around me, like standing in the eye of a storm I had predicted down to the minute. Natalie's face burned crimson. She shoved past Ethan, storming across the living room toward the door. Her angel wings caught on someone's shoulder. She ripped them free with a snarl and disappeared into the night. Ethan staggered after her, but one of his friends caught his arm. "Dude, stop. Just stop." The crowd's judgment pressed in on him from all sides. Eyes narrowed, heads shook. His charm, his smile, his life of the party mask, all of it fell, leaving him standing there exposed and ridiculous in red polyester and crooked horns. And then, as if on cue, his eyes found me. I turned at last, slowly, deliberately, like I'd only just noticed the commotion, my brows knitted in mild confusion. "What happened?" I asked innocently. Ethan stumbled toward me, desperation already crawling into his voice. "Clara, Natalie, she just freaked out. I didn't..." "Is he drunk?" I asked the group around me, keeping my tone neutral but loud enough for nearby ears to catch. "Of course I'm drunk," he snapped, then faltered. "But it wasn't like..." Natalie's absence howled through the room. Everyone had seen it. Everyone had witnessed the shove, the kiss that wasn't, the humiliation. And in that moment, Ethan realized something. I hadn't lifted a finger, and yet I wasn't the one on trial. He was. He grabbed my arm, lowering his voice to a hiss. "Why weren't you with me? You just left me." I pulled back slightly, letting my calmness echo across the circle of watching faces. "I was giving you space," I said gently. "You've been with her all night. I didn't want to be the jealous girlfriend." The words landed like a verdict. His mouth opened, then closed. He had no rebuttal. not when those exact lines had been his defense for months. The onlookers exchanged glances. I wasn't the insecure one anymore. I was the patient, wronged partner. He was the fool who had proved everyone's suspicions true. Ethan tugged at my sleeve. Let's go, now. I didn't move. No, I said softly but firmly. This is Sarah and Tom's party. I'm not going to ruin it for them. He blinked, stunned. The old Clara, the one who would have stormed out in tears, who would have clung to him in desperation, was gone. In her place stood someone unshakable, someone who knew the audience was already writing their verdict. Ethan cursed under his breath and staggered toward the door, alone, devil horns sliding into his eyes. I stayed. I smiled. I mingled. People came up to me quietly, one by one, their voices dipped in sympathy. Are you okay? God, I had no idea it was like that. You don't deserve this. I nodded, gracious and calm, sipping my drink like I had all the time in the world. The narrative had flipped, and I hadn't needed to raise my voice once. When I finally walked home later that night, the streets were wet with dew, the air sharp with cold. My phone buzzed in my purse, vibrating endlessly with Ethan's texts. I'm sorry, she misunderstood. Where were you when I needed you? I didn't answer, not then. When I opened the apartment door, I found him slumped on the couch, still in his devil costume, horns askew, eyes bloodshot. He shot to his feet the moment he saw me. We need to talk, he said, voice raw. Okay, I replied, setting my purse down with deliberate calm. Let's talk. And just like that, the real confrontation began. He stood in the living room like a man awaiting trial, still dressed in that ridiculous devil costume, makeup smudged, collar crooked. His eyes darted to me, then away, then back again, as though searching for a version of me that would collapse, cry, rage. I didn't give him the satisfaction. Go ahead, I said, my voice even. Say what you need to say. Ethan raked his fingers through his hair, pacing. It wasn't what it looked like. Natalie, she overreacted. I was just... He stumbled over the words, throat tightening. I didn't mean anything by it. Didn't mean anything by trying to kiss her in the middle of a crowded room? My tone wasn't sharp. It was surgical. Each word cut clean. His mouth opened, then shut. His chest rose and fell with the effort of holding back excuses. Finally he snapped, voice cracking. Why weren't you with me? You saw me drinking. You know how I get. You just stood there. You left me vulnerable. I tilted my head. Vulnerable? Ethan, you had Natalie by your side all night. You didn't need me hovering, remember? That's what you've been telling me for months. I shouldn't be jealous. I should give you space, so I did. The silence after that was heavier than shouting. His face crumpled into something between shame and fury. You planned this, he whispered. You just let it happen. I cut him off, stepping closer, my voice dropping to a quiet blade. No, Ethan. You planned this when you stood at a barbecue and told your friends that Natalie treats you better than I ever could. You planned it when you decided that flowers and soup outweighed the roof over your head and the bills I cover every month. I didn't create tonight. I just let you show everyone who you really are. His eyes widened, bloodshot and raw. You heard that? I heard everything, I said. My calm was terrifying even to myself. And from that moment, I stopped fighting for you. I just waited, and you didn't disappoint. He sank onto the couch, hands clasped like a man in prayer. His devil horns tumbled off, rolling across the carpet until they stopped at my feet. I picked them up, turned them in my hands, and placed them gently on the coffee table. They suit you, I murmured. For a long moment he said nothing. The apartment hummed with the refrigerator's low growl, the city traffic outside, the faint tick of the wall clock. He finally whispered, What now? I walked into the kitchen, opened a drawer, and pulled out the envelope that had been waiting for this moment. I set it on the table in front of him. What's this? He asked. Our lease renewal, I said. I've already told the landlord I won't be signing again. I've found a new place. You have 60 days to figure out where you'll live. He blinked, stunned. You're serious. As serious as you were about Natalie, I replied. Maybe she has a spare room. After all, she treats you better than I ever could, right? The words landed like stones. He flinched, his face pale. You're ending this over one mistake? He asked, desperation bleeding through. No, I said, soft but final. I'm ending this because of every mistake you thought I'd never notice. Tonight was just the final proof. He stared at me, broken in his cheap red costume, searching for a way back into the life he had so carelessly dismantled. But I'd already closed the door in my heart. I turned, walking toward the bedroom. My hand hovered on the doorknob before I looked back one last time. "You wanted an audience, Ethan," I said. "Now you've got one. And they'll remember what they saw a lot longer than I will." Then I closed the door, leaving him alone in the living room, halo gone, horns discarded, trapped in the silence of consequences. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the apartment like nothing had happened, but the air was different. Thick, stale, weighted with words neither of us wanted to repeat. Ethan sat at the kitchen table, head in his hands, a cup of cold coffee untouched in front of him. His phone buzzed again and again, messages lighting up the screen. He didn't reach for it. I poured myself a glass of water, my movements steady, deliberate. I could feel his eyes on me, waiting for me to explode, to demand explanations, to play the part of the betrayed girlfriend. I didn't. Instead, I slid the lease renewal letter across the table toward him. 60 days, I said. He looked down at the envelope like it was a death sentence. "Clara, you can't be serious." I leaned against the counter, arms folded. "I told you last night, I'm not renewing. I've already signed for a new place. You'll need to figure out your next step." He pressed his palms against the table as if grounding himself. "You planned this," he said, his voice hoarse. "No," I corrected calmly. "You planned it. You wanted the stability of me and the attention of her. You just never planned on the two worlds colliding in front of everyone. Now they have." His eyes burned. "You're cruel." "Cruel?" I let the word linger. "Cruel is standing at a barbecue, telling your friends another woman treats you better. Cruel is letting me cover half your life while she buys you coffee and gets the credit. I'm not cruel, Ethan. I'm finished." He didn't argue after that. He sat in silence, chewing on regret like it was too tough to swallow. I left him there, the lease letter staring up at him like a mirror. Over the next week, I became a ghost in the apartment. I still did the dishes, folded my laundry, cooked my meals, but I spoke little. I gave him nothing to feed on. No anger, no tears, no pleas, just distance. And that distance was louder than any screaming match could have been. The fallout came fast. Photos from the party began circulating online. Ben, the photographer, had uploaded them, thinking he was sharing fun Halloween candids. But among the smiling faces and glittering costumes were the shots that mattered. Ethan, drunk and sloppy, leaning in. Natalie's horrified shove. The shocked faces of the crowd. The story spread through our friend group like wildfire. Natalie deactivated her social media within days. Her angelic reputation scorched, her embarrassment too heavy to bear. She stopped coming around. Ethan's phone, once buzzing with constant group chats, fell silent. The same friends who had laughed at the barbecue now avoided him like a curse. And me? People began reaching out quietly. "I'm so sorry, Clara. We didn't realize how bad it was. You didn't deserve that," I answered politely, but I kept my distance. I didn't need their pity. I already had what I wanted: clarity. Ethan, meanwhile, spiraled. One evening, he cornered me in the kitchen, desperation spilling out of him like sweat. "I can fix this," he pleaded. "I'll block her number. I'll never talk to Natalie again. I'll prove to you I can change." I looked at him evenly. "You don't need to prove anything to me. You already did." I handed him back the long, tear-stained letter he'd slipped under my door the night before, filled with apologies and promises. On top of it, I placed a sticky note with 3 words written in black ink: "Too little, too late." His face crumpled as if I'd struck him, but I hadn't raised a hand, not once. My silence was the sharpest weapon I had, and it cut deeper than rage ever could. 2 weeks before move-out, his anger peaked. He stormed into my office, red-faced. "You manipulated me," he shouted. "You set me up. You destroyed my reputation. Everyone thinks I'm a monster." I closed my laptop slowly, met his eyes, and said, "I didn't destroy you, Ethan. I held up a mirror. If you don't like the reflection, that's not my fault." The fight drained out of him in an instant. He slumped against the doorway, defeated, small. I returned to my work without another word. By the last week, the fire in him had burned down to ash. He moved sluggishly through the apartment, stacking boxes without energy, staring at me as though waiting for a reprieve that would never come. But I had no reprieve to give. The sentence had already been carried out. And in the quiet of those last days, I found something I hadn't felt in months: peace. The final month felt less like living together and more like serving a sentence. The apartment became a library of silence. No laughter, no warmth, just the rustle of cardboard boxes and the faint echo of lives pulling apart. Ethan tried to bridge the gap at first. He'd linger in doorways, watching me cook, waiting for me to invite him in. He'd start small conversations about nothing, the weather, the game on TV, a funny video he'd seen. I responded with one-word answers, polite but distant. I wasn't cruel, I was empty, and that emptiness frightened him more than fury ever could. Outside our four walls, his world unraveled quickly. The Halloween photos had done their work. In one, Natalie's face was frozen in horror as Ethan leaned in, drunk and eager. In another, the crowd's expressions were caught, shocked, disgusted, amused. Those images traveled faster than gossip ever could. Daniel, a mutual friend, texted me. "We didn't realize. Sorry we laughed that night at the barbecue. We should have seen it." Kayla messaged, "You deserve so much better, Clara. If you ever need a girls' night, I'm here." The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who once saw me as background furniture were now recasting me as the wronged heroine. I accepted their apologies, but I didn't let them back into my circle. People show you who they are, and when they do, you believe them. Ethan, meanwhile, sank further. His phone, once buzzing nonstop, grew eerily silent. Natalie disappeared completely, her halo tarnished, her wings clipped by humiliation. She stopped showing up, stopped texting, stopped existing in his orbit. And without her, Ethan looked small. One night, 2 weeks before move-out, he cornered me in the kitchen. His eyes were bloodshot, his jaw tight. "You've been planning this for months," he spat. "You wanted me to fail. You made me fail." I didn't raise my voice. I didn't even turn fully to face him. I just set my glass of water down and said, "No, Ethan. I gave you what you wanted. Freedom. Space. The spotlight. All you did was show everyone what I already knew." His anger fizzled into something like desperation. "You've ruined me." "No," I said quietly. "You ruined yourself. I just stopped protecting you from it." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. After that, his anger collapsed into sadness. I'd find him sitting on the couch, staring at the dark TV screen, lost in thought. He'd start to speak, then stop. Sometimes he'd write in a notebook, tearing out the pages before I could see. Once he left another letter on my desk, begging me to reconsider, to remember the good times, to believe he could change. I didn't read it past the first line. I slid it back under his door with a sticky note attached. The good times ended at the barbecue. He didn't write again. The final week arrived, and with it, a kind of grim acceptance. Boxes lined the hallway. His things, hoodies, sneakers, the guitar he never learned to play, waited in stacks for a destination he hadn't yet chosen. I'd already moved half my belongings to my new place, filling the apartment with an echo of absence. The night before my move, I found him sitting cross-legged on the floor, staring at a pile of boxes like they might offer answers. "Clara," he said softly, not looking at me, "is there really no chance, not even a little?" I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. "No, Ethan, there isn't. You made your choice the night you stood in front of your friends and compared me to her. Everything since has just been the consequence." He looked up then, eyes wet. I didn't think it would end like this. I almost pitied him. Almost. But pity isn't the same as love. "It ends exactly how it was always going to," I said, my voice steady. "You just refuse to see it." The next morning, movers carried my new couch into the living room. Ethan stood by the window, arms folded, watching with hollow eyes as the men maneuvered around his half-packed boxes. That was when reality finally broke him. Watching another life, my life, arrive while his crumbled. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. The silence between us was victory enough. Moving day dawned gray and cold, as though the sky itself wanted to remind me that some chapters end without sunshine. I loaded the last of my things into boxes, taping them shut with sharp, echoing rips. Ethan sat slumped on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like it might offer him a map back to me. "Clara," he said finally, his voice hoarse, "don't do this. Please, we can fix it." I paused, my hands flat against the cardboard lid of a box. "No," I said softly, "we can't." He stood, desperate now. "It was a mistake. I was drunk. I didn't mean to." I turned to face him, cutting him off with nothing but my calm. "You made your choice at the barbecue, Ethan. When you stood there and told your friends Natalie treated you better than I ever could, You wrote the ending yourself. Everything after that was just the consequence catching up. His face crumpled, and for the first time, I saw not the devil from that party, not the boy who thrived on attention, but a man who had gambled everything and lost. The movers came and went, carrying out my boxes, my furniture, my life. Each trip through the door made the apartment hollower, emptier, until even the air felt stripped bare. Ethan didn't move. He just sat on the couch, watching his world shrink around him. When the last box was gone, I walked to the door. My keys felt heavy in my hand. I set them on the counter, the sound sharp in the quiet. Ethan looked up, eyes glistening. Is there really nothing left? Not even a chance? I shook my head, not unkindly. No, there isn't. He swallowed hard, his voice breaking. So what happens to me now? I opened the door, the hallway yawning bright behind me. You'll live with the better you thought you wanted, I said. That's all that's left. Outside, the air was biting but clean. I breathed it in like freedom. My new apartment was waiting, a space untainted by broken promises and cruel laughter, a place that would be mine alone. In the weeks that followed, I built a quieter life. I reconnected with friends who had always been loyal, who welcomed me back without the shadow of Ethan trailing behind. My nights were no longer filled with muffled laughter through the wall or the bitter taste of compromise. They were filled with peace. I heard things, of course. Word travels fast. Ethan moved back into his parents' spare room. Natalie never spoke to him again. Their so-called friendship collapsed under the weight of exposure. The friends who once laughed at me now kept their distance from him, unwilling to risk association. And Ethan? He faded, not into tragedy, not into villainy, just into insignificance. The best part wasn't his downfall. It wasn't the silence of my victory or the pitying glances from people who finally saw the truth. The best part was the clarity. I hadn't screamed, I hadn't begged, I hadn't fought to prove my worth. I had simply stepped back and given him the stage he craved. He performed. He revealed himself. And in the end, the applause he thought was his right turned into judgment. He wanted better. Now he gets to live with it.